Hello everyone, it is episode 19 of this Treasure Inside edition and it is May 6th, 2024. I'm joined by Management. Management, how are you doing this week?
Fantastic. Another weekend by the pool, hanging out with dogs. Can't beat that.
That does sound good. This weekend, this afternoon in particular, it was actually raining in Arizona, so it was a special occasion. It doesn't rain very often, but I'm here now. We survived the thunderstorm. What's been going on with you this week?
I have really been looking at ciphers themselves and not necessarily focusing on any specific treasure hunt, trying to teach myself about the different kinds of ciphers and word puzzles and different things that are out there, which is a world I've never gone into before. And that way, when I see something in the book, it might make it easier for me to recognize as that type of puzzle.
Grand ciphers. There are no grand ciphers.
Grand ciphers. It doesn't say there are no ciphers. It says no grand ciphers.
So mini ciphers are okay. It's funny, I see that. People are kind of so tempted to get into the ciphers. And even though he said there was no grand ciphers, people still want to get to know them just in case that it's something that they might need during the book. It seems like you're on that same thought path as well.
Yeah, and the word search is a really good example of going down that grand cipher rabbit hole. I think it's really easy with that because there are infinite alphabet ciphers.
Yes, that's right. Okay, so let's talk quickly about the treasure hunt token hunts for the week. I can't actually give you any solutions this week because they're still in the lucky draw phase. So there's some hunts there still open that people can submit and get into the lucky draw. What I will say, though, is we put up a couple different hunts last week. One, the free one for the podcast. The other one was for token holders only. We had 3 people attempt that hunt. So it was roughly $15, $20 worth of tokens you had to have. I will say, though, it's going to be higher value for the token holder hunts than the free hunts. So it's something like a $10 prize for the token holder hunt, $5 prize for the free hunt. But we've already had 3 people attempting that. We're starting to get a community going now with the token holder hunts. One of those has the right answer already. I can see on the back end, even though it hasn't been awarded yet. So someone will get awarded the prize for the token holder hunts. But I'm really excited to see that community growing. The people that have bought some treasure hunt tokens and are participating in those hunts. So if you haven't bought your treasure hunt tokens, please go ahead and do so, or email us if you're having any trouble doing that.
What's the email people should reach out to?
The email for treasure hunt token is treasurehunttokenofficial@gmail.com. Send us a message there, we'll help you through it, or just add me on Discord, I'll help you through it there as well. Okay, but one more thing we need for Treasure Hunt Token, the hunt we're going to put up this week for the free hunt. We need a code. Do you have a code for us this week, Management?
Stone cold nuts.
All right, one word?
One word.
And we'll reveal in a little second why that's the code for this week.
Absolutely. Excellent. So I'm really excited to talk to Rob, and I know he has a whole lot of really cool stuff to talk about. So should we bring him in?
Yeah, Rob has a lot of theories that he wants to go through, so I'm not sure we'll have time for all of them, but let's at least go through some of them. He's bursting at the seams with theories, so yeah, let's bring on Rob now and see what Rob has to say about the lion's share. Rob, how you doing? You go by Stone Cold Nuts on Discord, right?
Yes, I do. It's an old poker reference from, I guess, the early 2000s when I was really into rounders and the Chris Moneymaker era of poker. Yeah, so that's always been sort of like my online name, and I just never got away from it.
Well, I understood what that meant when you messaged me, but management said that's a great name, not knowing it had anything to do with poker. Stone Cold Nuts.
No, I thought it was just, I was like, badass name, all right.
Well, so, of course it's a poker reference, but also, like, how I view myself. So, I'm a bit aggressive, I'm a bit impulsive, I've got a little bit of, like, hyperactivity going on, so I feel like it fits.
Okay.
You
That's
know,
fine. That's fine. So getting on to this Treasure Inside edition. Okay, so how long have you been involved with that book?
I would say probably did I hear of it late October, early November? So basically what happened is I heard about the book and I was sort of loosely familiar with the Forrest Fenn hunt and didn't participate, never bought the book. But every time I saw an article about it, I was interested in it and then read it. And then, I read about the treasure being found, but then the finder didn't reveal his name. And then then we found out it was Jack. And I was sort of interested in all of that. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Well, someday on the internet, I came across There's Treasure Inside. And I'm like, oh, that's a cool book. I think I'm going to give this as a Christmas gift to one of my children. So I ordered it. And luckily I did, because right after I ordered it, it became unavailable because I guess the demand far exceeded the supply.
You got version one. You're just
I
like,
got version one. I did. And I was careful not to write in it, but I've read it so much it's not pristine. So I don't think it'll be worth mint condition money.
you were involved early. You were involved pretty much as soon as the book came out.
Yeah, so like the premise hooked me, drew me in, and I ordered the book as a present.
Okay, so what's been happening since? How long have you been working on the book, though? You gave it to one of your children.
So I have been working on the book since Thanksgiving Day because I decided that I couldn't wait any longer and I was going to give the book to myself instead of the person I bought it for. And that's what I did after I cooked Thanksgiving dinner. We all ate, we all spent our family time, and then I laid down on the couch and I read There's Treasure Inside. And I've been doing it ever since.
Since Thanksgiving, the family time's been put to the side, right? You straight into the book, locked in a room. Or how much time you been spending on this book?
So initially I was like hardcore, like into it, like nonstop day and night, just like all about it. And I had a notebook and I was writing down all my ideas, everything that I thought was a clue. I bought a magnifying glass. I bought a UV light off of Amazon. I bought one of those little tiny super magnifying glasses that like coin collectors have to look at really, really fine print. I was taking pictures of things with my phone and manipulating the colors and zooming in and out and, doing all that sort of stuff. But basically, what I found and discovered is that among all the different styles of treasure hunting in the book, I was far more interested in the lion's share or part one and reading the stories and writing down what I thought were clues and making connections. And this sort of like interweaving of everything in the book is way more my style of like intrigue. Like that spoke to me more than like a word search or looking at a map or solving a cryptogram or that sort of stuff. So I'm way more into reading.
It's interesting you talk about that, though, because both management and I felt like we were a little intimidated by the size of the lion's share. We wanted to focus on something that was a little more compact and a little more solvable. But you've gone in the opposite direction. You've jumped in to the lion's share, right? The whole 200 pages rather than being restricted to 3 or so.
Well, so that's the thing. Number one, it's like, it's the biggest box. I gotta go find the big one. And then number two, it's like, I just have this incredible self-belief, whether I should or should not. I just literally believe that I can do it.
You can
granted,
do it.
like, only one person's gonna find the lion's share, right? We are
I
all
want
wrong.
just a grain of your confidence.
I've just always been that way. And granted, I'm not the best at anything. So, but I certainly think I can do what I set my mind to.
You can do it, Rob. All right, let's get into this mindset.
I'm going to do it.
All right.
All right.
So there were some things you were going to talk to us about. Now, one of the things I was so glad you mentioned to me when you messaged me was you have a theory on the missing page 90. Now, we may have mentioned this once. I'm not even sure we've mentioned it at all on this show before. But for those who don't know, if you flip through the book, It goes from page 89 to 91. There is no page 90. And I've heard zero theories as to why this is the case. Did you want to run us through why you think there's no page 90?
Okay, so here we go. Rob, Stone Cold Nuts, theory as to why there's no page 9. Let's start in chapter 9, the actual chapter that does not have a page 90.
That makes sense.
At the beginning of that chapter is a quote. The explanation requiring the fewest assumptions is most likely to be correct. William of Ockham. So Occam's razor.
Okay, yes.
So I think the simplest explanation for why there's no page 90 is that JCB is telling us that there are things in this book that are missing and we are to find them.
Oh, right. I could see that.
We're not looking for an actual page. It's probably not going to be in one of the 4 smaller boxes. We're not shining our light in between page 89 and 91 to see what's in between there. This is his way of telling us something's missing.
Okay.
So that's the premise I'm operating. The very next chapter, chapter 10, is the Jackie Onassis chapter. And in that chapter, we learn about her husband, Jack Kennedy, and her brother-in-law, Robert Kennedy, more famously known as John F. Kennedy, or JFK, and Robert F. Kennedy, or RFK. So what's missing are their middle initials. Arguably some of the most famous middle initials in all of American history.
Okay, I'm with you.
So 2 things. Number 1, it's F and F. So I think that's like a little wink, wink, nod, nod to Forrest Fenn, which I think is pretty cool and clever. But I don't think it's the only thing. So R.F. Kennedy, his middle name is Francis. John F. Kennedy, his middle name is Fitzgerald. So we have Francis Fitzgerald.
I like where your head's at.
And the most famous Francis Fitzgerald I could find is a fellow by the name of Francis Scott Key Fitzgerald, more commonly known as F. Scott Fitzgerald, an American author most famous for his work, The Great Gatsby.
Yeah, I was about to say that. I was thinking
Doom,
the
doom,
meme.
doom.
I was thinking of the Leonardo DiCaprio meme. I couldn't come up with the name. Great Gatsby, yes.
Okay, also, Francis Scott Key Fitzgerald was named for his distant cousin, Francis Scott Key, who is best known for writing the poem The Defense of Fort McHenry, which eventually became the American national anthem, The Star-Spangled Banner. So I have 2 people that suddenly I'm interested in. I'm interested in Francis Scott Key, and I'm interested in Francis Scott Key Fitzgerald. And as a cute little aside, when we look at the book and we see a picture of the lion's share treasure, front and center, we see a keyhole. So logically, we need a key. So do we need a Francis Scott Key or a Francis Scott Key Fitzgerald? Maybe we do, maybe we don't, but I think I'm going to do some investigating. And that's what I did.
I think that's been one of the things that's kind of been setting me off, both with the Lion's Share and the Appalachian Trail box. It doesn't show the key anywhere. And if the boxes are part of the treasure, I assume the keys to open them are also part of the treasure. Why can we not see what the keys look like too? There's got to be something about that.
So my thoughts on that are that when Seth Gould designed the boxes, you manipulate them in a certain way, and he's going to leave instructions for us to do that. I imagine in one of these manipulations, a key will be produced. It will go inside the box, and you'll be able to open it. Or it's not a real keyhole, and it just needs manipulated in some other fashion. I didn't really dive too much into that, but that's just sort of like my that's just my prevailing thought on the topic that you mentioned.
So you mentioned that it was missing page 90 was chapter 9. You skipped ahead to chapter 10, right? Why did you
It's the
skip?
very well. It's the very next chapter. So I'm looking for the simplest explanation as to why something's missing. I continue to read the book. Here's chapter 10. Wait a second. We don't call these people Jack Kennedy and Robert Kennedy. And even if she did in her personal life, which she probably did, my husband Jack, my brother-in-law Robert or Bobby or whatever, that's a cute little way for him to not put the F's in there. Just cute enough for a lot of people to miss it, but still not there. And, not there, noticeably not there. And so, part of this, what if something makes your spidey sense tingle, write it down and go look. And that's sort of what I did.
So where you at with that? You got Francis Key, right?
So we have Francis Scott Key, Star Spangled Banner, and Francis Scott Key Fitzgerald, or F. Scott Fitzgerald, an American author. Now, it gets way better. So let's talk about F. Scott Fitzgerald because his is much more interesting and longer. If we have time, we can circle back to Francis Scott Key. But F. Scott Fitzgerald is way more interesting. Okay, so F. Scott Fitzgerald, American author of the novels This Side of Paradise, The Beautiful and the Damned, The Great Gatsby, and Tender as the Night. So his novels were set in the Jazz Age, which was this vibrant, hedonistic era of cultural and social upheaval in 1920s America, characterized by a nationwide embrace of jazz music, vibrant nightlife, and a spirit of rebellion against traditional norms.
Let's not forget Prohibition.
Let's not forget Prohibition. However, the features of the Jazz Age that I was particularly interested in when I did this research, number one, the music, right? So jazz music originated in African American communities, particularly in New Orleans. It became the defining soundtrack of the decade. Artists like Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, and Bessie Smith helped it reach mainstream popularity. So we have the music. The other thing that I was really interested in when I learned about it was what's called the Harlem Renaissance. This was the African American cultural movement at the heart of the Jazz Age in Harlem, New York. And this was known for groundbreaking work in music, poetry, literature, and visual arts. So, first of all, jazz music. We have the Pokemon chapter. We have New Orleans. We have jazz music. He wandered into like a jazz bar. JCB himself is a musician. And there's musical themes throughout the book, especially in Joy's Serenade. So I thought that was really interesting, this whole jazz music connection. Then I recalled Duke Ellington is specifically mentioned in chapter 5. Duke Ellington is a jazz pianist, and he's the leader of a jazz orchestra. And in chapter 5, the chapter about Art Smith. Art Smith was an African-American jewelry designer who became friends with a choreographer named Tally Beatty, who worked on shows with Duke Ellington. And Tally Bailey hired Art Smith to design this decorative jewelry for the dancers in these shows. So, I get from page 90's missing to the missing initials to F. Scott Fitzgerald to his novels to the setting of his novels in the Jazz Age. And all of a sudden, I'm in chapter 5 with Duke Ellington and Art Smith, a Jazz Age jewelry designer, emblematic of the Harlem Renaissance. So I thought all of that was like blew my mind. I was like, this is really cool. This is really interesting. I think I might be onto something.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing though. When you get down to this level of detail, when you're branching out for all these different directions, you have so much opportunity to hit on something that's within the book. So how do you feel confident, though, that what you're hitting on here is actually related to the direction you're supposed to be going versus, hitting on a bunch of tree structure, roots, and different things that might relate back to the book?
I would say let's continue because you might be interested to hear what else I discovered.
Sure.
So the way I look at it is
We have to
the
keep going.
we have to keep
You're
going.
a fantastic storyteller. You've just got us hooked in and like
I know.
ready to ask you the question, and you're like, I have an answer for that. Nah, 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 nah.
The more I find, the more I think that it can't be a coincidence. It can't be confirmation bias. I think it's a thing. So
Okay.
let's talk about the themes in F. Scott Fitzgerald's novels.
I will say John Collins Black loves a theme. I don't know how many times he talks about themes.
Well, we also know that John Collins Black, when he was in college, studied comparative literature of the Renaissance. So he has some sort of literary background in addition to his musical background. And he specifically mentioned that in the book when he was talking about taking all the classes that wouldn't lead to a job, just the stuff that interested him. But anyway, so the themes in the novels of F. Scott Fitzgerald are things like morality, love, greed. Greed's a good one because chapter 11, the very next chapter after chapter 10, treasures from a famous shipwreck, the temptress greed. Okay. More social ambition, hedonism, romance, riotous parties, alcoholism, mental illness. So all of these themes made me think of chapter 21, Antiquities of Alexander. And that chapter is called Make It Make Sense. So I think I'm making it make sense. So that's sort of my roundabout way to answer your question. So, what do we learn about in chapter 21, Antiquities of Alexander, Make It Make Sense? Well, first of all, we learn about Apollo, the god of poets and writers. And then Francis Scott Key, among other things, was a poet. And F. Scott Fitzgerald was a writer. We learn about the gold ibex headed bracelet, where he tells us to excuse the children from the room because he's going to talk about intimacy. And he tells us that gold is a symbol of wealth and prestige. And he tells us the ibex, which he said is like a fancy word for goat, is a symbol of seduction and potency. We learn about Dionysus, the god of fertility, wine, and pleasure.
I
Aphrodite,
like her.
it's a he, actually.
Oh
Dionysus,
man, I messed that up.
it's a he. Yeah, if you don't know, it sounds like a feminine name. I don't know. Aphrodite, goddess of love. Pan, god of wild music and spontaneity. Kronos, father of Zeus, who ate his children for fear they'd usurp him. That's my loose mental illness connection. I don't know. So, all of these themes that are in this chapter that's about us telling us to make it make sense are all the same themes that are in the novels of F. Scott Fitzgerald, who I arrived at because why is page 90 missing? It's the two F's from the Kennedys, and I got to Francis Fitzgerald and to F. Scott Fitzgerald and to his novels and the Jazz Age, and I get to a chapter about make it make sense, and all the themes are all the same. So I thought that was super interesting.
All right, so I'm going to ask the tough question here. And this might be where you're leading us because you've been really good at that so far. But okay, so where is the box?
Well, that's the thing. What does it all mean? Where are we going? Is there a location? Dear listener, listen on. Now, I can't promise that there's going to be a box at the end of this. I can't even promise that there's going to be like a football field size. I can't even promise there's going to be a city size, maybe a city size. But anyways, you're right. What does it mean? What does it mean? Where are we going? It's all nice and cute and sounds fun, but what does it mean? That's a very valid question, and that's the reason that we talk about these things. But before we get to that, let's talk about social ambition, another theme of the writings of F. Scott Fitzgerald. Remember, Jackie Onassis quit her job, her internship at Vogue magazine, because there weren't enough prominent men who worked there. So I thought that was interesting. What else I found interesting was F. Scott Fitzgerald's future wife, Zelda Sayre. Now, I didn't dive down any Legend of Zelda rabbit holes, but somebody
I've
tell...
got a Legend of Zelda rabbit hole.
Well,
Oh,
you know,
I've got a
probably...
Legend of Zelda rabbit hole
Detour.
for
Detour.
all the boxes.
Well, you should investigate that. I have not, but, you know, video games are a thing in the book, and now we have this Zelda, who's the wife of F. Scott Fitzgerald. But the reason I mention her is because initially, she rejected his marriage proposal due to his lack of financial prospects, and only agreed to marry him after the commercial success of his debut novel, This Side of Paradise. So I like this whole social ambition connection. Okay, this is where we're getting to, like, a city.
Okay,
So I
here we
think
go.
this is the payoff, and this is what we're looking for.
Boston.
It's not
Give me
Boston.
the good stuff.
This is the good stuff. Okay, in the Jackie Onassis chapter, we have a picture of Jackie Onassis and her daughter, Caroline. F. Scott Fitzgerald and his wife, Zelda, had a daughter, and her name was Frances Scott Fitzgerald. Frances with an E. Guess what name she went by? She went by the name Scotty.
Okay.
Okay, you remember chapter 1, Mike Scott, the first Apple CEO. He went by the name Scotty. And then we had the weird photo that said, not to be confused with Scotty from Star Trek. Well,
Okay.
Scotty from Star Trek is Captain Montgomery Scott. Now, here we go. F. Scott Fitzgerald met his future wife in Montgomery, Alabama.
Okay.
And Scotty Fitzgerald, their daughter, and we care about a daughter because there's a picture of Jackie Onassis with her daughter in the Jackie Onassis chapter. She passed away in Montgomery, Alabama.
Okay, so you got two. You got 2 pointers here to Montgomery, Alabama.
So I don't have like I've stopped at Montgomery. I haven't like gone to Montgomery, Alabama and looked at the parks and found any other things other than what's interesting is, remember in the Pokemon chapter, he goes from Statesville, North Carolina to New Orleans. You literally drive through Montgomery, Alabama to get there.
You know, I think this is one of those hobbies where it's kind of outlandish to begin with, right? So, like, you find these connections and you make these theories, and, you know, only one person's going to be right. And it's like, yeah, I sound crazy, but it makes sense to you. And one of these days, whatever makes sense to one person is going to be the right answer. So,
It seems like you're getting a lot of joy out of this book, though. So are you spending a lot of time thinking about this and running through theories in your head during the day?
So my personality type is that, like, I've always been interested in reading. I've always been interested in like figuring puzzles out. Um, I'm a bit competitive by nature. So back to the poker, like I always like things that are like a battle of wits of like me versus somebody else. So like that's why I like poker. That's why I play chess. I like chess. When I was in school, high school and college, I viewed test as like a battle of wits between me and the teacher or me and the professor. Not so much me versus the material, but you know, a little bit, I view like it's me versus JCB, and I'm trying to figure out what he put in the book. And like,
you're playing Battleship.
well, I just like these like intellectual like challenges, and even things that are loosely related to intellect. Like, I used to do Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and that's an intellectual type martial art. I like archery, and I like things where I have to like have proper technique. And then, in archery, there's a lot of, when you talk about arrows and veins and trajectories, and, it's all physics and math and stuff. So it's like, it's just like, I like using my brain to like tinker my way through like things like this.
But it
And
seems like it's giving you energy, this book.
um,
Like,
I, yeah, it's just really captivated me. So like, I bought the Justin Posey book. I haven't really read it. I've been in a few other treasure hunts. I bought the Lady Liberty book. So I live in Pennsylvania, so I'm in the Northeast. So Northeast type hunts interest me. And I hike the Appalachian Trail a lot. So initially, the Appalachian Trail interested me.
You can leave that one for me. It's fine.
Well, that's fine. But if you ever come to Pennsylvania, I'll show you everywhere that I've ever hiked on the Appalachian Trail, and it's a lot. Rather than just like staring at this map for hours on end, like I just like delving in, and I think real tangentially. I like making connections across every possible way. It just like my brain's funny like that. It's always has been. It always has been. I just like these random connections, and it just like invigorates me. It's just it's super fun. I thought about keeping this all to myself and not telling anybody, and just I'm gonna go find the treasure box. Well, I've not bought any plane tickets. I've not gone. You know what I mean? I'm not gone anywhere.
Do you think you'll go boots on the ground?
Well, I've considered it for my lion's share solve for sure. However, like, you don't have a lot of time. And then if you make that sulking, like, plane ride home with no treasure and you just spend $1,000 or whatever you spend, you're like, maybe that wasn't such a smart idea.
well, it's about the journey. You have to enjoy the hike, enjoy the journey looking for it, because I tell you, there's hundreds of people that have made that journey home already and not found the books.
Well, I think the reason that I decided to start, like, talking about this is that I can't guarantee myself any treasure no matter what. However, I can potentially guarantee myself a psychological sliver of potentially being involved in the solve. If anything that I say was true or was of value or set somebody else down another rabbit hole that I sparked them to, like there's a non-zero possibility that I could be responsible for someone solving the hunt. And I think that's super cool. But
That
if
is
I
cool.
just but if I just sit at home and read this book and never go anywhere, and then somebody finds it and I say, "Hey, I knew it was there. I had this whole solved like months ago." Yeah, yeah, yeah. Sure you did.
That's my worst nightmare. I would feel like such a nincompoop. I'd be like, why didn't I just go? So, I have a theory that I want to run by you,
Ooh,
which
go for it.
is the missing page 90 related. So,
Okay, go.
I think that it's not missing. I think there, in actuality, page 90 is there. It's just mislabeled. Every page thereafter is mislabeled. So it's more of a thinker. Philosophically, the book says there's 243 pages, but physically, there are only 242 pages in this book.
Okay.
You can't change that. So page 90 isn't missing. Page 90 is there.
The number 90 is missing.
The number 90 is missing.
All right. Well, Rob, we've gone over time. We'll have to cut it short there. But thanks very much for coming on and sharing your theories.
Well,
I'm
thank
sure
you.
you'll have plenty more coming in the future.
Well, I look forward to speaking with you folks again. I will continue to work on the book.
Okay, well, thanks very much for joining. Good luck with your hunt, and I guess you can credit us with the first outlet that you let people know about your theories that led to the box.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you having me on.
Okay, thanks, Rob.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Well, that was fun. Rob seems like a great guy. Definitely has a voice for radio, so that was great.
Yeah, Rob's got a lot of theories. I think he spent a lot of time on this. Wouldn't it be great if one of these theories is the one that ends up leading to the box? So we were going to talk about a lot of Lionshare this week. Remember we said last week, it's Lionshare week this week. Well, we went so long with Rob, we're going to have to wait till next week till I run through some of the summaries of the Lionshare from the community. Can you hang on another week for us?
They're going to have to. But I feel like we pumped them full of a bunch of good stuff to think about. Or
That's
Rob
right.
did, rather.
The page 90 theories that I've not heard of before. At least Rob started us down that path. If anyone else has some page 90 theories, let us know. Email us, come join the show, tell us about your theories for the missing page 90 as well. Because I haven't heard any theory, so Rob's theory is the best one I've heard so far.
Yeah, don't be shy. Come on the show. Just ask us to be on the show, and we'll probably put you on the show, because literally that's how I ended up on the show. Is I was just like, hey, Chaz, can I be on your podcast?
What are you talking about? There's an audition process? Rob had to talk to me on 3 different sessions to get on the show?
We are very, very professional.
Right, okay. So, Lionshare next week. For everyone, start getting your Lionshare theories together, because we're going to hit it next week. I'm also going to be going through a past and future theory that I found on the forums as well. But until next week, we'll have a good week, and we'll see you next week to talk about the Lionshare.
Bye, everyone.
Well, thank you for listening to There's Treasure Inside Edition. It's a community podcast for There's Treasure Inside by John Collins Black. You can always find us at there'streasureinsideedition.com or email us at there'streasureinsideedition@gmail.com. By the way, as always, don't forget to subscribe, like, and review our podcast. It really helps us grow and bring more people into There's Treasure Inside Edition Treasure Hunt.